My dad was still clapping when the scholarship committee handed me the giant cardboard check. I stood on the high school auditorium stage, lights in my eyes, trying not to cry as the announcer read my name. Zoe Miller has received the full-ride leadership scholarship to State University, covering 4 years of tuition, room and board. The crowd cheered. My mom dabbed her eyes. My dad whistled. My older brother Luke sat there looking bored, scrolling on his phone. For one shining moment, I forgot all about him. All about the constant, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" comments. The way my parents had sunk every spare dollar into his private coaching, his travel teams, his dream of playing D1 basketball. It was just me, the microphone, and the promise of a future I'd earned for myself. Then, on the way home, my mom turned around in the front seat, her smile already fading into something more calculating. "So," she said, "now that college is covered for you, we should talk about what you're going to do with your portion of the college fund." My fingers tightened on the fake check. "What do you mean, my portion?" I asked. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, you don't need it anymore," he said. "Not if this scholarship covers everything. Your tuition, your dorm, meal plan." "Yeah," Mom jumped in. "So it only makes sense to give your share to your brother. Luke lost some of his scholarship after the injury. He needs help finishing school." I stared at them. "My share?" I repeated. "Of the fund Grandma left for both of us? The one you always said was split 50-50? Dad frowned like I was being selfish. "Family helps family, Zoe," he said. "You got blessed with this full ride. Luke wasn't so lucky. You're not going to hoard money you don't need while your brother struggles, are you?" That was the first time I realized something important. To my parents, my hard work wasn't mine. It was community property. Community meaning Luke. And they had no idea their little secret about that college fund wasn't going to stay secret much longer. I'm Zoe, I'm 18, and for as long as I can remember, my brother Luke has been the sun our family orbited. He's 3 years older than me. Tall, athletic, the star point guard of our small town. Coaches loved him. Teachers cut him slack. The local paper wrote about him like he was a celebrity. When people met me, they didn't say, "Oh, you're Zoe." They said, "Oh, you're Luke's little sister." Like that was my full name. My parents fed into it. Every conversation at the dinner table was about Luke's next game, Luke's stats, Luke's recruitment letters. If I tried to talk about my science fair project or my AP exam score, Mom would smile distractedly and say, "That's nice, honey. Now, Luke, tell us about that scout who came to practice." They weren't bad people. They just had a very clear hierarchy. Luke, golden child. Me, support staff. When Luke tore his ACL his sophomore year of college and lost his shot at going pro, our house went into mourning for 6 months. Mom cried more than she had at her own father's funeral. Dad walked around like a man whose stock portfolio had just tanked. Meanwhile, Luke pivoted sort of to a new dream, sports management. He kept his partial athletic scholarship at the small private college he was already attending. But there were gaps. Big ones. That's where the college fund came in. When Grandma Miller died, she left behind more than just her recipe cards and a house full of ceramic angels. She left a small trust. Nothing outrageous around $80,000. But to us, that might as well have been $1 million. Her lawyer had sat us down in his wood-paneled office when I was in 6th grade and Luke was a freshman in high school. "Your grandmother wanted to help her grandchildren with education," he'd said. "This fund is for Zoe and Luke. It's to be divided equally between them for legitimate educational expenses. Tuition, books, fees, housing." Mom and Dad had nodded solemnly. "We'll take good care of it," Mom had said, squeezing Luke's shoulder. She knew how expensive college is going to be. The lawyer had raised an eyebrow. "I want to be very clear," he'd said. "This money can't be used for vacations, cars, or personal debts. If there's any left over after their schooling, it gets divided between them at age 25. He'd handed Dad a folder full of documents. "Zoe and Luke have a right to see statements when they're 18, he added. "Transparency is important with family trusts." I remembered those words. I didn't realize how important until years later. By the time I was in high school, the college fund was mostly talked about like a mythical thing in the background. Whenever Luke needed something expensive for basketball, a new training camp, a tournament in another state, Mom would say, "We'll take a little from the fund." It's for his future. Whenever I asked about it, she'd wave a hand. There'll still be plenty left for you, she'd say. Focus on your grades. So I did. While Luke practiced free throws, I did practice tests. While my parents drove hours to watch him play, I sat at home with my textbooks. I didn't resent it all the time. I liked school. I liked being good at something, even if it wasn't the thing they bragged about. But I won't lie. When I started getting scholarship offers junior year, there was a tiny thrill in knowing I'd done something that didn't depend on a ball going through a hoop. The full-ride leadership scholarship to state was the big one. It covered everything: tuition, room, board, plus a small stipend each semester for educational expenses. When I got the acceptance letter, I'd run screaming through the house, waving it like a golden ticket. Mom and Dad had hugged me. Luke had said, "Nice," and gone back to his game. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would shift the spotlight a little. Instead, my parents just found a way to turn my win into Luke's bailout. In the car after the scholarship ceremony, they laid out their plan. "Well," Mom said, "since your school is paid for, we think it's only fair to use your half of Grandma's fund to cover the rest of Luke's tuition. Plus," Dad added, "the stipend money you'll get each semester can go into the family pot. We'll make sure it gets used wisely." "Family pot?" I repeated. "The letter says that money is for textbooks, supplies, transportation, my stuff." "You'll have more than you need," Mom said. "We'll keep track. You know we'd never take from you." I stared out the window. "What if I don't agree?" I asked. "It's my inheritance," the lawyer said. Dad cut me off, his tone sharpening. "The lawyer works for the family," he said. "And this family needs Luke to finish his degree. You share blood. You share blessings." Mom nodded. "You're always saying Luke doesn't appreciate how hard things are," she said. "Show him how it's done. Show him what a team player looks like." There it was. The weight I'd felt my whole life being put into words. I wasn't just Zoe. I was Luke's safety net. I went quiet. They took my silence as agreement. That night, I called my best friend Maya. "They can't do that," she said immediately. "It's your scholarship, your inheritance, your future. They're technically the trustees of the fund until I'm 18, I said. "They say as long as it's used for education, they're within their rights. You're already getting a full ride," she said. "What if you want to go to grad school, study abroad? That money could help you." "I know," I said, my voice small. "You have to fight this," she said. "Ask the lawyer. Remember that folder your grandma's attorney gave your dad? There has to be something in there about this." My brain did a little click. The folder. The file that had been in our dining room cabinet forever, under old cookbooks and takeout menus. "Maybe," I said slowly, "I should read it myself." "Definitely," she said. "And while you're at it, maybe check if your half even exists anymore." Knowing how they've been with Luke, she didn't have to finish. We both knew. If there was a pot of money labeled for Zoe and Amp, Luke's education, and one kid was constantly in need of just a little more, the odds that the pot had been evenly dipped into were low. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. In my mind, two versions of my future were playing side by side. In one, I let my parents steamroll me, hand over my stipend, smile as they siphoned off my inheritance, spend 4 years watching my half of Grandma's love pay for Luke's pizza delivery. In the other version, I said no, and dealt with whatever explosion came next. It wasn't an easy choice. But right then, sitting at my desk with my scholarship envelope on one side and my FAFSA login on the other, something solid built itself in my chest. I'd worked too hard to have my life rerouted again toward my brother's lane. If my parents wanted to keep secrets and play favorites, that was on them. I was done playing along. The file from the lawyer was in the dining room cabinet, just like I remembered. Dad was at work. Mom was at yoga. Luke was at his girlfriend's. I pulled the folder out and took it to my room. There were bank statements, trust documents, a copy of Grandma's will. I sat cross-legged on my bed and started reading. The trust document spelled everything out clearly. Initial amount, $80,000. Beneficiaries, Luke Miller and Zoe Miller, equal shares. Purpose, educational expenses only, including tuition, required fees, books, and reasonable housing. Trustees, my parents. Condition, Trustees shall provide annual statements to beneficiaries upon their 18th birthdays or upon reasonable request. So Maya had been right. I had a right to see where the money had gone. The most recent bank statement in the folder was from 18 months ago. Balance, $6,214. My stomach dropped. I flipped back. 3 years earlier, $52,000. The year before that, $65,000. Lots of withdrawals with vague labels like tuition, books, camp. And a few that made me blink. Car payment Luke, credit card Miller. Home equity interest. Those weren't educational expenses. At least not in the way Grandma had meant. The last page was a handwritten note from Grandma, dated 2 years before she died. Dear Zoe and Aunt Luke, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. Don't be sad, sugar plums, I lived a good long life. I wanted to help you both with school because mine ended after 10th grade, and I always wished I'd had more chances. This money isn't a fortune, but it's enough to give you options. Please use it wisely. And if anyone tries to tell you it's for the family or just a rainy day fund, you show them this letter and remind them. Grandma said education only. I love you more than biscuits. Nana Ruth. I traced the shaky letters with my finger. Something hot and angry rose up in my chest. Not only had my parents used the fund as Luke's personal ATM, they'd dipped into it for their own bills. They'd stolen from both of us. From Grandma. From the future she'd wanted for us. And now they wanted to take what little was left of my share and pour it into Luke's degree like patching a leaking boat with someone else's umbrella. I took photos of every page. Then I slid the documents back exactly where I'd found them. On my way out of the cabinet, my eye caught on another envelope tucked behind the file. FAFSA Luke, it said. I shouldn't have. But I did. Inside were printed copies of Luke's financial aid forms. On them, my parents had forgotten to list a savings account. The one Grandma's trust was in. They'd lowered our expected family contribution by lying about assets to get Luke more need-based aid. FAFSA fraud. I took photos of those too. Not because I planned to call the Department of Education, but because knowledge is power. And for the first time in my life, I had more than they realized. I didn't confront them right away. Part of me wanted to run into the kitchen waving the documents and scream, "You lied!" But another part of me, the quieter, more strategic part, said, "Wait. What do you actually want?" I wanted control over my own scholarship and stipend. Access to whatever was left of my half of the trust. To not spend the summer being emotionally blackmailed. I also wanted my parents to feel even a fraction of the vulnerability they'd made me feel, knowing my future could be redirected on a whim. So I made a plan. First, I quietly contacted Grandma's lawyer. I emailed him the photos and asked for a call. He remembered me. "Zoe," he said warmly over the phone. "It's been a while. How's school?" "Graduated top of my class," I said. "Got a full-ride scholarship to state. Your grandmother would be proud," he said. "What can I do for you?" I didn't sugarcoat it. "My parents have been using the trust for things that aren't education," I said. "Car payments, credit card bills. Now they want me to give my share to my brother because of my scholarship. I need to know what my rights are." He made a noise that was half sigh, half growl. "I had a feeling this might happen," he said. "That's why we wrote those restrictions." He explained that as long as I was under 18, my parents had a lot of control. But the moment my 18th birthday hit, I had legal standing to demand a full accounting. And given the documentation you've sent, he said, you'd have grounds to petition the court to remove them as trustees for misusing funds. My heart thudded. Would that get them in trouble? I asked. Legally? Potentially, he said. But more likely, the judge would require them to reimburse the trust or at least freeze it so they can't touch what's left. In any case, it would make your wishes very clear. We talked options. The more he explained, the more a path formed in my head. A path that did not involve me handing over my scholarship stipend like an ATM. "Let me draw up a letter," he said. "We'll start there. Sometimes a firm reminder from a lawyer gets people to straighten up without going to court." "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "One more thing," he added. "Your grandmother also set a condition that any remaining funds at age 25 go directly to you and Luke. No trustees, so whatever's left is yours by then, no matter what your parents say." That sentence settled over me like armor. They could guilt me. They could pressure me. But they could not take what was legally mine forever. Not if I protected it. My 18th birthday was 3 weeks after the scholarship ceremony. Mom planned a small family party. Cake, burgers on the grill, Luke making an appearance. What she did not plan on was a FedEx envelope arriving that afternoon with Grandma's lawyer's return address. Dad opened it at the kitchen counter. His face went pale. "What is it?" Mom asked, flipping burgers. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just some trust paperwork." I walked over. "It's addressed to me," I said, holding out my hand. He hesitated, then gave it to me. Inside was a formal letter. "Dear Ms. Miller, at the request of our client, Zoe Miller, and pursuant to the terms of the Ruth Miller Educational Trust, this letter serves as formal notice that Ms. Zoe Miller, now having reached the age of majority, requests a full and complete accounting of all trust activity for the past 10 years, to be provided within 30 days. Ms. Miller requests that no further disbursements be made from the trust without her written consent, except for her own educational expenses. Any attempt to divert Ms. Miller's share of the trust funds to other parties, including but not limited to her sibling Luke Miller, without her express consent, may be considered a breach of fiduciary duty and subject to legal remedy. Sincerely, James W. Carter, S.K. I looked up. Dad's jaw was clenched. Mom had stopped flipping burgers. "What did you do?" she demanded, snapping the spatula down on the counter. "I asked for what Grandma said I was allowed to have," I said calmly. "Information. And a say in how my share is used. We talked about this," Dad said. "We agreed as a family that Luke needs no," I said. "You decided." I stayed quiet. "That's not the same thing as agreeing." Mom scoffed. "Lawyers cost money," she said. "You had no right to go behind our backs like this. You had no right to use the trust for car payments and credit cards," I shot back. "Or to lie on Luke's FAFSA forms." Their eyes widened. I held up my phone where I'd pulled up the photos. "Educational expenses only, remember?" I said. "And you didn't disclose the trust on the financial aid paperwork. That's fraud." Dad's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said. "We did what we had to do to keep this family afloat." "You did what you had to do to keep Luke at his expensive private college," I said. "There's a difference." Mom slammed the spatula down again. "Everything we've done has been for you kids," she said. "We sacrificed vacations, new cars, everything so you could have opportunities. You also took opportunities away," I said softly. "From me. From what Grandma wanted." Luke wandered in then, smelling the burgers. "Yo," as the food he started, then stopped, sensing the tension. What's going on?" "Your sister decided to hire a lawyer and accuse us of stealing," Dad said bitterly. Luke looked at me. "Seriously?" he said. "Over what? Some dusty savings account?" I stared at him. "Over the trust Grandma left for both of us," I said. "The one you've apparently been using like an ATM." He frowned. "I thought that was for tuition," he said. "Mom said there was plenty. Plenty until you needed new wheels," I said. "And until they decided my scholarship meant my half should go to you." He shifted, uncomfortable. "Look," he said, "I didn't know all the details. I just thought we were a team. You got the full ride, I got the fund. It evens out." "It doesn't," I said. "Because I worked my butt off for that scholarship. And I'm not going to let my inheritance be turned into your beer money." "Hey," he started. "Enough," Dad snapped. "We're not doing this now. It's Zoe's birthday." He said it like the word birthday was an inconvenience. I picked up the letter again. "You're right," I said. "We're not doing this now." I folded the paper and slid it back into the envelope. "Because I'm moving out." They all stared at me. "What?" Mom said. "I'm moving into the dorm early," I said. "State has a summer bridge program for scholarship students. I talked to my advisor. There's a spot. I leave next week." "Without asking us?" Dad said. "My scholarship covers housing," I said. "I don't need to ask. I'm an adult now, remember?" Mom shook her head, eyes shiny. "You're being dramatic," she said. "We're family. We can work this out. You're not just going to run away over some money." "It's not just money," I said. "It's trust. Or lack of it." I looked at Luke. "And it's about not spending the next 4 years watching you live off things that were supposed to be for both of us while I pretend that's okay." He looked half defensive, half guilty. "Zoe, Come on, he started. I held up a hand. I'm not asking you to fix it, I said. Or to pick sides. I'm just done being the one who gets told to take one for the team every time there's a choice between you and me. Dad folded his arms. If you walk out that door, don't expect us to come running when things get hard, he said. I smiled, but it felt sad. That's kind of the point, I said. I'd rather learn to stand on my own 2 feet than keep balance beaming on your shifting rules. I went to my room. Started packing. It wasn't a dramatic movie montage. No slamming doors or shattered plates. Just me, folding clothes into a duffel bag, taking down the few posters on my wall, and carefully packing the things that really mattered. My acceptance letter. Grandma's letter. A USB drive with all the photos of the trust statements and FAFSA forms. The last one, the drive, I slipped into the hidden pocket of my backpack. That was their secret. I was taking it with me. Not to blackmail them. But as protection. As proof. In case they ever tried to paint me as the ungrateful one to family or financial aid offices or anyone else. As long as I had that drive, I had the truth. And they knew it. Moving into the dorm early was both terrifying and liberating. The summer bridge program was a mix of orientation, study skills, and don't flunk chemistry 101 boot camp. Most of the other kids were first-gen college students like me. We bonded over crappy cafeteria food and the weird smell in the laundry room. For the first time, my identity wasn't Luke's sister or the responsible one. I was just Zoe, the girl who knew how to write a killer essay and fix a leaky sink with duct tape. Mom texted me a few times that first week. We miss you. When are you coming home to visit? Your brother needs your help picking classes. You're good at that stuff. I responded politely. But I didn't go home. Not yet. Dad ignored the lawyer's letter for 2 weeks. Then a second one arrived. It was less friendly. The day he finally called me, I was in the library. This is ridiculous, he said without preamble. Do you know how much trouble you're causing with this trust nonsense? Transparency isn't nonsense, I said. It's literally in the trust terms. He snorted. Your grandmother always was dramatic, he said. Look, the market crashed. Bills piled up. We had to use some of the money. That's life. Some? I repeated. There's $6,000 left. He went quiet. You saw the statements, he said slowly. Yes, I said. And I saw Mom's note from Grandma. And the FAFSA forms. And the part where the trust says you can be removed as trustees if you misuse funds. He exhaled hard. What do you want, Zoe? He asked. For us to grovel? To write you a check we don't have? No, I said. I want you to transfer what's left of the trust into a separate account with both our names on it and the lawyer as co-signer. No more withdrawals without both my and Luke's signatures. I want written confirmation that you won't touch my scholarship stipend. And I want you to tell Grandma's lawyer the truth so I don't have to. That's blackmail, he muttered. It's boundaries, I said. We went back and forth. In the end, he grudgingly agreed, not because he suddenly saw the light, but because he was more afraid of a judge than of me. A week later, I got an email from the trust company confirming the new account structure. There wasn't much left, but it was no longer something my parents could drain for the family. It was mine and Luke's. And Luke, for all his obliviousness, now knew exactly how much remained. Grandma's secret pot of gold had been replaced with a very visible, very finite piggy bank. It changed things. The next big shift came from Luke himself. He showed up on campus one afternoon in August. I was coming back from the bookstore when I saw him sitting on the steps outside my dorm, staring at his phone. What are you doing here? I asked, surprised. He looked up. He'd lost a little of his golden shine. There were circles under his eyes. Hey, he said. Can we talk? We walked to a shady bench. For a minute we just sat there, listening to the distant sound of an intramural game. So, he said finally, Mom and Dad told Grandma's lawyer they wouldn't touch the trust anymore. And that my tuition payment this semester is coming out of somewhere else. His jaw flexed. Dad sold his boat, he said, and took a loan against the house. I blinked. I didn't know, I said. Yeah, well, he said. Apparently when there's a lawyer involved, they can't just hide it from me either. He picked at a splinter on the bench. I'm not great with money, he admitted. I know that. I let them handle things because I didn't want to think about it. Just play, you know? I nodded. Grandma always told me I'd get to college because of my talent, he said. I never thought about the numbers. You did. You always did. He looked at me. I didn't ask them to take your half, he said. Or to lie on the FAFSA. I swear. I believe you, I said. You've always been an oblivious golden retriever, not a mastermind. He huffed a laugh. I don't know what that means, he said. But I think it's an insult. We sat in silence for a bit. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For not noticing. For letting them make you the bad guy when you were just trying to stand up for yourself. Tears pricked my eyes. Thanks, I said. He pulled something out of his backpack. I talked to my advisor, he said. There's a state transfer program. If I move here next year, my tuition drops. There's a community college bridge, then state. It's not as flashy as private U, but... He shrugged. I think I've been chasing the wrong dream, he said. Being the star. The D1 athlete. I forgot school is about... I stared at the pamphlet. You'd transfer here? I asked. To state? He nodded. If they'll take me, he said. I'd have to pull my grades up. But... It was weird. Part of me recoiled at the idea of my brother joining what had finally felt like my space. Another part saw the bigger picture. This wasn't just about money. It was about both of us unhooking from our parents' expectations. Would that make them mad? I asked. Probably, he said. They like bragging about the private college more than they like paying for it. But I'm tired of being the excuse for every bad decision. He looked at me. I'm also tired of you being my collateral, he added. We laughed, watery. That's the nicest thing you've ever called me, I said. My relationship with my parents didn't magically heal. They were still prickly. Mom still made comments about ungrateful children and how hard parenting is these days. Dad still griped about lawyers. But there was a shift. They knew I wasn't afraid to involve other adults' lawyers, advisors, financial aid offices if they tried to mess with my future. They knew I had their secret on that USB drive. Not as a weapon, but as a reminder. I visited home occasionally. Short visits. Boundaries. When Mom tried to bring up my stipend again, you're getting more money than you need. Maybe you could send some home? I'd say, my expenses are my business, and change the subject. When Dad muttered something about family sacrifice, I'd say, I already sacrificed. Remember the trust? And watch him fall silent. Grandma's secret wasn't really a secret anymore. It was a lesson carved into our family story. About favoritism, about honesty, about what happens when you treat one child's future as negotiable. 2 years later, Luke transferred to state. He moved into an off-campus apartment with roommates. He got a part-time job at the rec center. He wasn't a star anymore. But he was happier. One night, we sat on the campus lawn after a late study session, looking up at the same sky we'd grown up under. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd just gone along with it? He asked. All the time, I said. I'd probably still be living at home, handing over my money, watching you drive a nicer car than me. He winced. I was such a jerk, he said. You were a kid in a system that told you you were the main character, I said. I was the one who agreed to be an extra for too long. He nudged my shoulder. Not anymore, he said. We sat there, the golden child and the responsible one, on much more equal ground. For once, the future felt like it belonged to both of us. On our own terms. Not as lines in someone else's financial plan. Do I regret how I handled things? Sometimes. On bad days, I picture my parents sitting at the kitchen table, bills spread out, looking older and more tired than I remember. I think about how hard they did work long hours, skipped vacations, and feel a twinge of guilt. But then I think about Grandma's letter. If anyone tries to tell you it's for the family, you show them this letter and remind them. Grandma said education only. She knew. She knew exactly how families like ours operate. How easy it is to let the loudest needs drown out the quieter ones. How easy it is to call exploitation sacrifice and control love. I think about sitting in that pawnshop bright scholarship ceremony with my parents already plotting how to reroute my win. And I don't regret drawing a line. I don't regret moving out. I don't regret taking their secret with me. Because that secret, those documents, that proof wasn't just dirt on them. It was a mirror. It showed me a version of myself who didn't stand up for her own worth. And then it showed me I didn't have to be her. I could be the girl who walked onto a college campus with a suitcase, a USB drive, and a stubborn belief that her future belonged to her. Not to the golden child. Not to the parents who couldn't see past him. To me.